want to open with passing on Tuesday night of NFL, football icon, we'll say. I mean, he's mostly tied to the NFL, but John Madden passing away at the age of 85 on Tuesday night. And rarely in sports, and this is why I think it's important to open up with this, because rarely in sports is there someone who is so universally loved that isn't polarizing at all. Because generally when you have people that are loved that much, there's usually a decent sized group of people, a contingent somewhere else that isn't about him at all. And as much as one group loves him, another group's going to hate him. And so John Madden, in every generation, he means a little bit of something different, but he was someone that I always enjoyed watching. My dad always enjoyed watching. Both of us former players, friends, everyone enjoyed watching John Madden on TV. He was kind of like the John Candy, I think, of the NFL. He was entertaining. He also provided the insight, the impact, the analysis, all of those things that you want to see. John Madden brought that each and every Sunday, and then Monday nights and Sunday nights again to your television screen. But the NFL losing a guy like that at 85, and you begin to put together these pieces. And as I saw John Madden throughout the last couple of years, you begin to wonder, like, how many years does he have left? He's a big dude, went after, pretty hard, played the game in college, and then coached for a long time. Notably hated flying, and that's part of the reason he got out of coaching, and the stress and the ulcers. Gets into commentating. He has the Madden cruiser, like popularized, the custom coach cruising around the country each and every week for all of these different stops, and people talking about it and showing where he's going and everything else. But every generation he was something different. To my dad's generation, he remembered him. He called some of my dad's games, called a lot of my dad's games. Very complimentary to my father. But my dad grew up, he was watching him as the coach of the Raiders. And think about this. Like, John Madden was the coach of the Raiders, youngest coach, 32 years old in NFL history at the time, takes that job over. He had some legendary coaches, Eric Coryell, he coached under before, like Sid Gilman, like some elite trees that he was a part of. Unbelievable guys that he was able to learn under. And so John Madden, was part of all of that. And so he was a coach, 750 plus winning percentage in the NFL, minimum of 100 games. It's as good as you're getting. Winning 75% of your games. That's going 12-4 every year in the NFL. Before they went to 16 games, back when he was coaching, they were in 14, but 12-4 every single year. Doesn't even make sense. He wins the one Super Bowl. He went to 5 AFC championships, lost. But he's coaching against Bud Grant, Tom Landry, Don Shula, the elite coaches, the Titans of the game. Those are the guys that were his contemporaries. Those are the guys that he's coaching against. Week in and week out, some incredibly gifted coaches, some incredibly talented coaches, and he's able to rattle up a 750 winning percentage as a coach. So he gets out of that. And then he goes into broadcasting. And it's rare that you could ever say someone who's a non-player and really a non-coach having that big of an impact on the game. But if you look at the NFL and how it's become, America's game, the national game, what has been able to happen with it, a lot of that is due to John Madden. I mean, you look at anybody knows the parodies now of him drawing up everything. He's got 1 million marks on the screen. Boom. Just like that. Tough acting can act in the commercials. He's doing the Ace commercials. He's out there and he's talking in his trademark voice and his boom, just like that. He's got it all right there. And so for a generation, my generation, he's the guy that when you knew he was on your game, that you were watching, it was important. It was a big time game. And I would be remiss if I didn't bring up his partner who's passed away as well from the booth for so many years, Pat Summerall. Pat Summerall lived in Dallas. I got a chance to get to know him a little bit. Absolutely fantastic human being. And he would always joke with the fact when they started the video game, which we'll get into that in a little bit, that he goes, I took more cash up front and less of the stock of the game. I didn't know what these video games were. He's like, John took a lot more equity in the game. It's like, look who's smarter, me or him. It's like he's doing a heck of a lot better than I am. And so John Madden, with him being the commentator, and how big he was. And then we'll get into some stories about that, because from 2006 to 2008, when he retired, I believe he did the Super Bowl in 9 that season. And that was his last year as a commentator for NBC on Sunday Night Football. You know, that was my first 3 years in the NFL. And so when you're with the Dallas Cowboys, he's going to call a lot of your games. So I got a quick little anecdote about that, and, you know, some John Madden stories, and just a chance to get to see like a guy who I grew up watching, an icon, and playing the game. And so that's the last piece of how do you bring sports to masses? How do you bring football to people who never play football? How do you get them to care about it? Well, now it's video games. And so he was able to bring football to people who never played football before, people who were never going to play football, who didn't have the skills, or maybe you had a physical impairment or disability that you weren't able to play, but you could play Madden. You hear John Madden, Pat Summerall commentating your games, and it became a cultural feat. Yeah, my kids, they don't know who John Madden is. They know about Madden, the video game. Everybody plays it. And so that's the impact that he had, being able to sculpt. And like coaches, the amount of times I heard coaches as I was growing up, you know, and playing in college, and we'd have some guys that were raw players, developmentally raw, you know, good athletes, understood, you know, what they were doing in their game, part of the game, but they didn't understand the totality of it. Maybe they got into it late, or maybe, you know, they came from another country. Maybe they didn't watch a lot of football growing up. And the amount of coaches that I had talked to who would say, well, you know what, the guy's going to be a heck of a player. We just need him to get him to play some Madden to understand like how the game really works from like a macro aspect. They understand like their little bubble, whether it's defensive end or, you know, wide receiver or running back, whatever, but they didn't understand everything. And so he's like, we just need him to play some Madden. And so that they don't understand their job, they can understand the thrill of calling a play, calling a defense, being the coach, figuring out who's the most impactful guy on that play. And so while John Madden, it's just his name on it, his voice, you know, and EA Sports provided the rest, you know, it's been a cultural phenomenon. And what's your Madden ranking and rating and everything else? As a coach, as an analyst, and then as like a conduit to the masses, we'll say, for the sport of football. Like John Madden was larger than life, and still is larger than life, because even in his death, his video game is going to go on. And some of my, like I said, my favorite games, my favorite memories were watching him as a kid call games, watching clips of him call my dad's games, and listen to him talk in his deep voice, that baritone voice as he's diagramming the play and drawing things up. It was amazing. And then when I knew we had Sunday night, you had John Madden on your game. It was a big stinking game. And it was a huge deal to have that be a part of your weekly preparation, knowing that John Madden was going to be on the call. And